Hello, my wonderful little collections of bones. It's me, Glass Lotuses, your friendly and mildly eerie digital artist, writer, and cat lover. How are you doing this evening? I hope you've had a pleasant day. My new cat, Minty, has been punking my resident cat, Shiso, and using me as a proxy to do it. Minty will pull up, give Shiso a quick skippity-pap, and ask for the smoke, and when Shiso gives her the smoke, Minty yells like she's being murdered, like she didn't just ask for it. On that theme, last week we talked about Ione, the god of balance and vengeance. Today, I want to talk about the god of cruelty and selfishness. I'm going to dive into a bit of how I think about this set of three gods, balance, selfishness, and selflessness, and why they're categorized as they are within the pantheon. I'll get to Raura's backstory, but this episode will also contain some more overlaying discussion on how information is being presented to you, the viewer. If you haven't already watched the video on Ione, the god of vengeance and balance, I highly recommend watching it before consuming this one, as they are very related. Over the past 3 weeks, we've covered the gods of vengeance, knowledge, and death, all of whom worked under the god of earth and decay, Amanita. We have now concluded that group of three and are moving on to the group under Tiburon, the god of water and monsters. Raura here is the god of selfishness. It is also not uncommon to hear her referred to as the god of cruelty, war, pain, and suffering. While Ione fell under the god of earth and decay because balance is a key element of the give and take of the biological systems that make up our world, hunting and eating for food, the nature of decay and recycling of biological matter, and the reactive natures of fear and self-defense, Raura, on the other hand, falls under the god of water and monsters, with an emphasis on the monsters. While the classification of Tiburon also simply includes complex and predatory creatures, monster magic specifically includes things with warped souls, things which act outside of the regular tit-for-tat. Additionally, I'm often asked why vengeance and cruelty are in Order's court, as most people don't interpret them as being orderly concepts. Vengeance and balance, as concepts, are very give and take in equal measure. They have an equilibrium to them. Once again, we circle back to the chemistry references. Selfishness and cruelty also are orderly in that they serve to keep the host alive. If you are not some level of selfish, if you are not some measure of self-serving, even at the expense of others, you will perish. In a biological system, you must attain energy from something, and your life, at minimum, is at the expense of that. While Raura represents an excess of this trait, in some quantity it is natural and necessary. Raura, as a deity, oversees and inspires the selfish impulses which push people to act beyond what is logical for simply reciprocating actions. She is cruelty for the sport of it, selfishness and greed to the point that you have scorched the world around you, and a kind of detachment from society. If Ione acts to balance things, Raura heavy-handedly slams the scale to the table in one direction. A lot of characters within the story, though, tend to misinterpret the utility of Raura's magic type. For example, and this is a very minor spoiler, as it's a rather minor detail, partway through the first book there's a scene in which a character consumes a potion made to help them not worry about the pain they're about to inflict on others, as that is how many interpret Raura's abilities to work, as the god of cruelty. However, much of her ability actually centers around the self and wholly internal thoughts and desires and processes. And what ends up happening is, instead of being able to detach, like the original intent of the potion was supposed to do, it made them simply wish to run away, as they never actually wanted to be there at all. They were staying because they were acting on external influence, while everything inside them was telling them to stop and leave, so the potion made them want to act on those internal self-based desires. Despite this distinction, much of how Raura is framed is more focused on cruelty and war. I think it's important to point out that the way I present and frame almost everything I tell you in these videos is from the perspective of characters within the mortal world, not typically characters within the divine realm. So when I say that Ione is the god of vengeance and Raura is the god of cruelty, that is not what they truly are. That is what people think of them as. especially given that the gods have been absent for over 1,000 years. Mortals' interpretations of them were drastically shifted by the War of the Gods, and then in their absence, opinions and memories distorted over time. And with these two having played massive roles in what happened during the war, the mortals watched and felt the fallout and then modified their understanding of the gods accordingly. To those watching a selfish god who would rather burn down the world completely if it didn't suit them personally, that would certainly seem cruel. To those watching a god lashing out at someone who caused them pain, their actions will seem vengeful. And thus you get to a state where the symptom has become the primary, and the cause is the secondary. Much like Ione, before Raura became a god, she was born into the universe previously created by the god of mercy. To recap quickly, in this world, every sentient being had a number somewhere on their person. This number related to how frequently someone acted to help someone else or hurt someone else. Behaviors required to sustain life within reason did not impact this score. While Raura lived later than Ione in the world's timeline, she was initially born and raised into the same order of neutrality, which aimed to keep their numbers at exactly 0. While most people in the world tried to keep their numbers as high as possible to denote that they were a caring and pleasant person, Raura got it into her head that if keeping your number at 0 was better than the rest of society and helped their god more than high numbers, then why wasn't sinking even lower than that much better? If 0 was better than 1,000, why was negative 1,000 not better than 0? Would that not serve their deity more effectively? In her late teens, Raura decided to start acting upon this theory. Slowly, she performed fewer and lesser good behaviors to offset her negative ones. In the beginning, she really didn't harm anyone, but she committed petty theft, arson of old structures, destruction of already run-down things. She quickly graduated to offending and hurting people she disliked, and then turning people against one another or heightening existing feuds. She would take things that she wanted whenever she wanted, break things for fun, say whatever she wished, and just went about her life disregarding the wishes of those around her. She then began to convince others that negative numbers were freeing, and that the positives were just all trying to control each other socially. If you freed yourself from the notion that you needed to perform for society, you could do whatever you wanted. She gained traction and a following. People who disliked the way things were followed her. People who disliked this break from social order tried to stop her, but she would either undermine their platforms or sometimes completely dispatch them, depending on the situation. Over time, the mindset of different groups of people shifted, and a polarization overtook society, dividing people into the positives and the negatives. Political turmoil rose, and fighting broke out between the groups. The negatives blamed the positives for impeding upon their freedoms, for controlling them and how they expressed themselves and lived, and the positives blamed the negatives for taking away their safety and ruining the order of their society. Further, this was a self-reinforcing state of order, as when someone chose to start working their number down, and if they dove too low and then regretted their decision, positive society could see that their number was low and would reject them returning, assuming they were in line with the negatives even if they decided to change. Similarly, if you had a positive number, it was hard to switch over to the negative side after a while. A schism formed and only widened over time, preventing members from flipping sides. In-group biases formed, and turmoil brought about political leaders. And fighting turned to war. What Raura didn't know, but had correctly surmised, was that the god of their world, later known as the god of mercy, thrived by feeding off of suffering and by relieving it. As people suffered and were distressed, he would grant wishes and ease their minds, and that would promote their belief in him. The suffering increased people's belief and gave people the chance to demonstrate their own selflessness. Mercy disliked the pain this drummed up in the world, but had needed the boost to his power to be more effective. Wars between societies escalated, and of course Raura was at the front of the negative group. At least, she was until she turned up dead. For now, I shall leave our story there in suspense, but that was the close of the mortal life of our god of selfishness. As an additional fun fact, I wanted her name to kind of speak to her aggressive nature. Thus, much like a lion's roar, her name is Raura. In this drawing in particular, I of course wanted Raura's overall design to match and contrast with Ione. While her skin is somewhat washed out here, it is actually a light pink color in the same vein as Ione's, but a bit paler. I wanted her horns to kind of look somewhat like a crown, but not to be too similar to Basker, who has a crown-like design to his asymmetrical horns. Aside from looking crownish, I wanted them to seem dangerous as well. So rather than just 2 large horns, I gave her 2 large horns and 4 little horns to make her look rather spiky overall. I realized none of my characters had beauty marks of any kind, so I decided to give her one near her eye for funsies. I saw the pose I wanted to use here in a cosplay video, and then I mocked it up in Design-Doll. The head angle was definitely different than what I'm used to doing, and looking at it now, I'm like, I don't think her jaw is in the right place. But I honestly don't know if I could do better today, since I don't really practice upward and side tilted head angles like that very often. Perhaps I should. While Ione has very curly, almost white hair, I wanted Raura's hair to contrast that and be very straight and much more warm-toned. I also wanted it to be very flowy to show off the motion of the explosion. While Ione has a 0 on her shoulder to indicate the neutrality she kept in life, Raura's number is as negative as you can really get, with the numbers getting so small it completely paints her left hand in red, almost as though it were bloody. Raura is depicted as having almost claw-like nails, while Ione's aren't really like that. In life, I think Raura probably would have had normal nails, so it's likely just a feature she picked up when she became a god or spirit. Overall, I wanted her to look somewhat punk, but with the tools I had, I didn't really know how quite to do that. And I'm also honestly not very great at fashion, so I somewhat just resorted to using a chain brush to kind of hint at those themes. Honestly, I am not super pleased with her outfit, and will try and style it better in the future. Overall though, this is Raura, our selfish, assertive, lovely god of cruelty. Thank you for listening to my ramblings. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're interested in learning more about this story, the world, and the characters within it, please like and subscribe. Good night.